So I love the Gospel of John. It's got to be one of the best Gospels. It's just wonderful. I love the way John writes it. And so as Rob established on Sunday, that in the beginning, he established that Christ is God. He is God in flesh. He establishes that deity, and that deity is established through the testimony of John the Baptist. And then we see Jesus calling his first disciples. And the first disciples, as recorded in John, is Andrew and Peter, the fishermen. And of course, there's this pattern of people telling their friends and their family. And so Andrew tells Peter about Jesus, and Peter becomes a disciple too. And the same thing happens with Nathaniel and not Bartholomew, because he's the same guy, Philip. So we then meet in verse 43. It says, the next day, Jesus decided to go to Galilee. He found Philip and said to him, follow me. So we're introduced to Philip, first of all, before we're actually introduced to Nathaniel. Now, Nathaniel, as I said, he's also called Bartholomew in the other Gospels. In the Gospel of John, he's the only one that calls him Nathaniel. Everybody else calls him Bartholomew. He's not a major character. There's not a lot about him. But I love him. I think he's great. And each person, actually, that we study, they're not really major characters. They're just little snippets. They're normal, everyday people. I mean, Mary and Martha, probably they've got quite a lot. They're, have a lot to do with Jesus. But even so, they're just normal people, just every day. And we'll see with Nathaniel, he's just a regular person, just a regular bloke. And, as I said, there's not a great deal on him, but he's from Bethsaida, which means a town of fishermen. So we can kind of assume he's a fisherman. And he does go at the end of John with Peter, after the death of Jesus and his resurrection. And Peter says, hey, I'm going fishing. And a bunch of them go with him. Well, Nathaniel's one of them. So we can maybe assume he's a fisherman, and that's what he does. We don't know for certain. So as I said, there's not much that we do know about him. But Jesus' encounter with him, as recorded here, is brief, but it is endearing. There's just something precious about their interaction and this encounter, and I love it. And when we pause and see Jesus, we can actually see that we have these moments with Christ ourselves, and we have this bond too, available to us through Christ. So let's just read from 43 down to 51. We'll actually just read the encounter. He found Philip and said to him, follow me. Now Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, we have found him of whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. Nathanael said to him, can anything good come out of Nazareth? Philip said to him, come and see. Jesus saw Nathanael coming toward him and said of him, behold, an Israelite indeed, in whom there is no deceit. Nathanael said to him, how do you know me? Jesus answered, before Philip called you, when you were under the fig tree, I saw you. Nathanael answered him, Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel. Jesus answered, because I said to you, I saw you under the fig tree, do you believe? You will see greater things than these. And he said to him, truly, truly, I say to you, you will see heaven opened and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man. So here's this brief encounter, and we meet Philip, who then goes to find Nathanael. And so the first thing that we learn about Nathanael is, I have called it a seeker found. And Nathanael appears as we go through it to be a seeker. And this seeker, we see, has a friend, and he has a good friend, is Philip, who found Jesus first. And I love the fact that Philip goes to find Nathanael. It shows that Nathanael actually kept good company. Philip seems like he's a good guy who's also seeking Jesus and seeking who the Messiah is. And so Nathanael's got some good company. He's making friends with other people who are seeking Jesus. So he's got some good friends. He's got like-minded people. Philip, it's this natural thing, isn't it, that we want to tell people about good things that we have, hair products or, face products and, the latest cheap shop, but also Jesus. We want to tell people about Jesus. And so Philip wants to tell Nathanael about Jesus and wants to share, and he's willing to share as well. He's willing to share this wonderful experience that he's had with Jesus, somebody that's going to give him life. Philip's willing to share that. And so Nathaniel is able to partake of that because he's friends with Philip, somebody that's like-minded as himself. And it says that Philip told him that he's found him of whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote. Now, it's interesting that he puts that it's Moses and the law, the prophets, the Old Testament. And we can assume that Nathaniel knows the law really well and knows the prophets and is seeking and reading and in the New Testament himself, because that's who Philip refers to. So he knows that Nathaniel is in that. Andrew, when he went to find Peter, he said, I found the Messiah. And so he just proclaimed, I found, the one who will save. Whereas Philip says, I found the one that it's written in the law, in the prophets. So obviously Nathaniel was this studious guy that was looking into scriptures. Philip, he also says that he found Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. So he's very accurate. He's specifically saying, this is the guy. He's from Nazareth, and his dad is Joseph. That's the guy. I have found him. And of course, we have the classic response that we all know so well that Nathaniel says, can anything good come out of Nazareth? And this is just, it's so classic, isn't it? You've got the rivalry between towns, even back then. Even in Jesus' day, there's, towns going, no, nobody can come good from that. And, that town, every culture seems to do it. We do it, and they were doing it. There was, this rivalry that, that's not a good place. Nothing good can, come out of Nazareth. And, Nathaniel, he's just pretty blunt. He just comes right out with it. And, it seems like a harsh response, but it's probably a very honest response. And it is quite funny. But it's also a bit of a prejudice response as well. He's got some preconceived ideas about the town and about what kind of people come from the town. So he's already got in his mind that, nothing good can come from there. And Philip gives exactly the right answer. Come and see. You can't argue with prejudice. You can't argue your way with them. The only way that they can truly change their mind is by seeing and experiencing and actually going and seeing. And so Philip doesn't argue. He just says, just come and see. And it's the same response as well that Jesus actually said to Andrew. He says, come and see. And so Philip has this same response. No, Nathaniel, you need to come. You need to come and see. But if we're truly searching, we won't let prejudice get in the way. We will keep an open mind and go, okay. And obviously Nathaniel did. He laid it down, and he did go and see him. But it's interesting, verse 47, it says, Jesus saw Nathanael coming towards him. Now, even though Nathanael was going to go see Jesus, it states that Jesus saw Nathanael first. And, John chooses to say that he saw Nathanael. And in fact, that wasn't the first time he saw Nathanael. As we read, he saw Nathanael under the fig tree. So it's this beautiful picture of Nathanael being the seeker, and yet it was Jesus that saw him first. As he was seeking, Jesus can see Nathanael. And I love that picture. And what does he say? He says of him, he says, behold, an Israelite indeed, in whom there is no deceit. And what a thing. I love that phrase. I first of all love that phrase because wouldn't you just love to meet Jesus and him proclaim just a wonderful encouragement, just a one sentence about you, just something positive. If I was to meet Jesus, what would he say, that one sentence? He said it to Nathaniel. I'm like, wow, he was so lucky to get that sentence proclaimed over him. I often think, well, I wonder what God would say about me. Just the one sentence, just that encouraging, I think that's really special that Nathaniel got. And it is such a compliment, in whom there is no deceit. Deceit or guile, it can mean craftiness, trickery, like scheming. He's a man without a mask. So what you saw is what you get. And obviously, he spoke his mind about people from Nazareth. So, you knew where you stood with him at all times. He's honest. He's a kind of guy you'd like to be around, and obviously Philip enjoyed being around him. There was no deceit, there was no acting, there was no fakeness. He was who he was. And that was obviously Jesus saw that, and that was a blessing to Jesus. But he proclaimed it over Nathaniel. He said, behold, look at that man. He is honest. And he was won over by his words. Jesus didn't say, there's Nathaniel who's got a bit of prejudice in him. Because although he had no deceit, he was prejudiced. But Jesus didn't point that out. He didn't go, yeah, there's that guy. You thought nothing good could come out of Nazareth. Well, just look at me. There you go. I'm here to prove you wrong. Jesus didn't do that. He found the encouragement. He found the positive. And we're won over by affirmation. We're never really run over by criticism, are we? That doesn't always do us good. But Jesus affirmed him. He found that positive in him. And it was that would lead Nathaniel forward. And Nathaniel, what does he say? He says, how do you know me? It's sort of a surprise. Obviously, it was true. But also, just to meet somebody, for them to proclaim something like that, he take you back. Well, how do you know me? And that's why Jesus answers, doesn't it? He says, before Philip called you, when you were under the fig tree, I saw you. So Jesus hits the nail on the head with who his character is, which was a surprise. But he goes one step further. Not just, I know you, and I've just had a revelation as you're walking up. He says, I saw you even before you were walking up. I saw you as you were sat under the fig tree. And that obviously had a powerful effect on Nathaniel because that was a private moment. It could have been that he was sat under the fig tree when Philip came to find him. It's quite possible. A lot of commentators say that. But it was his private moment. Nobody else was there. How else could Jesus have known apart from the fact that he has that supernatural power? So not only does he have the supernatural power of seeing into his life, he actually saw him before. And it's this beautiful picture that he sees in those private, personal moments when we don't think anybody is noticing. Jesus noticed Nathaniel, and that had a huge effect on Nathaniel. It's that made Nathaniel proclaim that he's the Son of God, that Jesus actually noticed him. But also, just as a symbolism of the fig tree, the rabbis would often use it as a place for meditation and for study. So that's why we also think that Nathaniel was a seeker and very studious, because he sat under the fig tree, which, symbolizes this studying. But it's this knowledge that Jesus knew and saw him. And so then he declares. The fact that Nathaniel was touched by being known actually shows that we do, as people, have a need to be known and to be seen. And psychologists are also saying that is a fundamental part of being loved, is to be known and to be seen. And that's that fundamental part. Timothy Keller, he actually wrote, to be loved and not known is comforting but superficial. To be known and not loved is our greatest fear. But to be fully known and truly loved is a lot like being loved by God. It's what we need more than anything. And it's so true, isn't it? We can be loved but not always known. Maybe like how we would love a celebrity or a sports person. We love them, we don't really know them. So it's nice, but like he says, superficial. And our greatest fear is for somebody to find out who we are and then not like us and not love us at all. And that is our greatest fear, which is also what hinders us from making ourselves known. Because we're afraid that we won't be liked and we won't be loved. And so that hinders us. But to be fully known and to be still loved, that's the best. And that's what Jesus had. Even though Nathaniel wasn't perfect, as we pointed out, Jesus knew him and he still loved him. And Nathaniel was touched by that. And that's what made the connection with Nathaniel and Jesus, that Jesus knew him. And it's this need to be known. It can only be fulfilled in Christ. Knowing that Christ knows you. That's the only way it's truly going to be fulfilled. We can try and have it fulfilled by other people knowing and liking us. We can go down the track of trying to be the best at something and the most beautiful and the most intelligent and, it's sort of a celebrity syndrome. We can try standing out from the crowd and be known that way. We can be sort of controversial if we want. We can be non-conforming. Sometimes we can be known by that. We can also be known by good things too, and that can be a good desire, but it also can be a tricky desire. If we want to be known for the one who is seeking Jesus or the one who has the most fruit, or the one who's most outspoken for Jesus, or kind, loving, good works. If we base our value on being known for those things, that's the wrong motive. And we still won't be fulfilled, because there's always going to be somebody that doesn't like what we do, doesn't like what we say, doesn't like how we do. So there's always somebody that's not going to like it. And then that crushes us. And then we realize, well, I don't quite have that trust in the Lord. I'm not content with just Jesus knowing me. I've been trying to get other people to know and like me, instead of just being content with Jesus saying, I see you and I know you and I love you. And that's where we are truly fulfilled. And that's where the connections are made. And I love that he says when Nathaniel was under the fig tree. It wasn't when Nathaniel was doing anything great. It wasn't when Nathaniel was, studying really hard, passing all of his tests, succeeding in a great way. He was just that, in a very mundane way. He just sat under a fig tree. We don't know if he was studying. We can kind of think that he was, but he's just sat under a fig tree. And Jesus saw him, and that touched him. And it's funny because down in London, Olivia introduced me to a new app. It's a social media app, and it's called Be Real. And at first, I'm just like, oh, another app. Now what are you doing, kids? And all my kids have got it. And they're like, oh, this is really great, Mom, you need to get it. I'm like, I do not need another social media app. I really don't need that. But then they start messing with it. Now, this app is actually the opposite to Instagram. It uses pictures. But it's the opposite. Instagram's very perfect. We're going to put our perfect side up, filter the pictures, and, put the best of our day up. Well, Be Real is a little bit different. What it does is it will give you a notification any point in the day. You don't know when it's going to be. And you've got 2 minutes to take a picture of what you're doing. And it takes a picture of your front and the back, so it uses both sides of the camera. And then you put it up for all your friends to see. So it's in that moment. I'm like, oh, Olivia, now you're doing it. She's like, oh, this person's doing that, and that person's doing this. So then the next day, all my kids were doing it. I'm like, I want to go. I'm going to do that. So I downloaded the app and started doing it. And it was really quite fun. So I'm out walking with my mum, and I get the ping. I'm like, oh, it's Be Real. I need to take a picture. Come on, Mum, let's take a picture. And she's like, what are you doing? I'm taking a picture. This is this new app. And I'm telling her, she's like, oh, dear, what are you doing? And now I'm like, Mum, you should do it. It'd be really good. It's really fun. Oh, I'm not doing another app. Same as what it was with me. When we got home, I'm like, come on, Mum, let's see. Right, that's what Olivia's doing, that's what Molly's doing, and that's what Elizabeth's doing. And she's like, oh, I want to do that. I want to have that. So she goes home, and the best of it is, she sends me this text, and she goes, what's that app, Useless Days? I'm like, you mean Be Real? Because what comes up is just really mundane things. It's me sat at my computer. It's me walking the dogs. It's, my daughter walking to work. It's my other one, sat at the desk. It's me that's just pulled up in the car and I've just taken the picture. Really boring things. I mean, it's terribly boring. There's nothing interesting at all. She's like, the Useless Days one. I'm like, well, it's the real one. It's Be Real. And it is. It's real. But it's so mundane. But, interestingly enough, I love it. I love seeing what Olivia's doing all the way up in York and what Elizabeth's doing. And my mother-in-law's on it now, too. So I'm seeing what she's doing in Tucson. And they're just random pictures, just sat there. But there's that connection made. Just in the mundane. It's not glorified. It's not hyped up. It's just that, oh, that's what you're doing. And it's just really nice to know that somebody just took notice that I walked the dogs. Somebody liked it. Somebody saw what I was doing in my day, and it made that relationship, made that connection. And I think about Nathaniel when, Jesus says, I saw you. He didn't need Be Real. Jesus doesn't need the app, He's omnipresent. He always saw Nathaniel, but he saw him under that fig tree, and Nathaniel was like, he noticed I was just sitting and meditating or studying. He notices that, and that's where we get that connection with Jesus. It's where we get the connection as well with others, by seeing, by knowing, and by still loving. I still love you even though you're sat doing nothing or watching TV or whatever it is. I still love you. I still see you. So verse 49, as we move on, it says, Nathanael answered him, Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel. So he proclaims what John says in the beginning, that the Word became flesh. that Jesus was deity. Jesus was God's son. And here Nathaniel proclaims it. He sees it. He says, that Jesus is that image of God. And I love what Rob says, it's a complete replication of God. He's that total image. And this is what Nathaniel's saying. You're the son of God, but also you're the king of Israel too. And that a king of Israel has a kingdom. And that Nathaniel is part of his kingdom. If you're a king, you've got a kingdom, you've got a belonging, you've got an identity. And Nathaniel wants to be part of that. He wants to be part and follow a king who has this kingdom, the kingdom of heaven. And it's under his protection as well. We have that identity and that protection. And so Nathaniel draws this connection with him. And Jesus answers, doesn't he? He says, because I said to you, I saw you under the fig tree, do you believe? You will see greater things than these. And he said to him, truly, truly, I say to you, you will see heaven opened, and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man. So he says, I told you that tiny little thing, just a tiny thing, and you're blown away. You're going to see so much more when you walk with me. You're going to see more. You're going to see miracles. You're going to see more things than that. And he points out, this heaven opening and the angels ascending and descending on the Son of Man. It's interesting because this is from Genesis 28, Jacob's ladder. And if you remember, Jacob fell asleep and had the dream about the ladder and the angels were ascending and descending on the ladder. Well, Jesus is saying that the angels are going to ascend and descend on him, that he is that ladder, that he is that connection. But it's also interesting that this is Jacob's dream. And Jacob, actually, his name means heel catcher. He is the crafty one. He is deceit. He did have a lot of guile when Jacob tricked Esau out of his birthright. Esau said, well, you named him rightly, didn't you, Dad? He's living up to his name, and he did. He was the tricky one. He was crafty. And yet this, it's Jacob, after he wrestled with God, that God then said, I will call you Israel. And he named his people after this tricky, crafty person, but once he had submitted to the Lord, he then became Israel. And so, going back to what Jesus said about Nathaniel, that you're an Israelite indeed, there is no deceit in you. He's saying you are all Israel and you're no Jacob. And I love that there's this contrast between Nathaniel and Jacob. It's like, you're not Jacob, you're honest. You're true. There's no Jacob in you. You're all Israel. And so you have this picture, and Jesus says that he is that ladder. He is that bridge to heaven. He's going to be the ladder, and the angels are going to ascend and descend on him. So what he's saying is that heaven opened, and we get the salvation. We get a way to heaven. We get that, and he is that ladder. And what is greater, Jesus is saying to Nathan, what is greater than me seeing you is you having the ability to see heaven. And through Jesus, you're going to see heaven. Your way has been made to see heaven, to see salvation, to see eternity. See, seeking and seeing, it's not a one-time thing. It's continuous. It's a lifetime. It's going deeper. We don't just seek him once and then that's it. We've got it. We have to keep on seeking, and he reveals more of himself to us. He reveals more of ourselves to ourselves as well. Things that we need to deal with, things we need to give to him. But also he reveals our gifts and our talents, and our strengths that we can nurture and that we can use for him. He wants to say, you're good at this. You've got that is strong. You've got that characteristic, just as he did with Nathaniel. He wants to reveal that in us so that we can nurture it and we can move forward, we can develop it, and we can follow him. And Nathaniel, the beautiful thing about Nathaniel is he went from seeking the Lord to seeing him. He got up and he actually saw him. And there's that difference, isn't there? We're seeking him, but there's a moment when we need to just see him and embrace him and move forward. And that's what Nathaniel did. And he became that disciple, one of the 12, that walked, that followed with Jesus. And he was called, wasn't he? He was called a disciple. And as we follow Jesus, as we get close to him, he reveals our calling. We're all called to follow him. We're all called to be his disciples. But as we walk with him, he reveals more things to us. He reveals his way, and he reveals his will, as what he did with Nathan. And so that's why we started Nathaniel. That's why we started with him, because here he is seeking. He's seeing, but he also follows. He has a calling, and we have a call just to continue seeking, to continue following. And that's why we're going to go through these encounters to see how we can closely follow. With each encounter, we can learn something different from each person that's going through something different, has a different need, or maybe not a need. Maybe they didn't even know they had a need until they met Jesus, and he fulfills that need. But we walk in our calling, and we find out what our particular calling is simply by remaining close with the Lord as he reveals things day by day. So if we want to see great things as well, as he says, doesn't he? He says, you will see greater things. And if we want to see heaven opened, we need to be looking towards heaven. We need to keep our eyes heavenward, not on this earth, not being consumed with the things of this earth, but looking to heaven, looking to Jesus, storing those treasures up in heaven and keeping our eyes upwards, looking at him. So let's pray. Father, I thank you so much for Nathaniel. Lord, for this honest man who was blunt, who spoke his mind, but who was seeking you, who was willing to lay down his prejudices, his preconceived ideas, and to actually meet you. And Lord, what a blessing it is to know that you see us, and you know us, and that you still love us, and you delight in loving us too. Lord, I pray that we would just take encouragement that you do know us, and you're looking with interest, Lord. You're not looking with judgment. You're not watching us to point a finger. You're looking because you're interested, because you love to see what we're doing. You delight in watching your children. Lord, I just pray that we would walk knowing that we're known by you and that we are loved by you. We ask these things in your name. Amen.
You've been